So good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are joining us. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join the Salesforce Admins webinar, How to Become a Security-Minded Admin. Today, I am so happy to be joined by Lynn Simons, Director of Security Advocacy at Salesforce. You can follow her on Twitter at lsimons0524. Much like some of our other presenters, I don't know what the numbers mean. Maybe that can be a question for the end of the webinar. Of course, my name is Mike Gerhold. I am the Senior Manager Admin Evangelist. You can follow me at Mike Gerhold on Twitter. No numbers, just to keep it easy that way. It wouldn't be a Salesforce Admins webinar without a forward-looking statement slide, so please make all of your purchasing decisions based on current features and functionality and not on any of the forward-looking statements we may make during this webinar. And as part of the webinar, I want to remind everybody to be social with us. So you can follow Salesforce Admins on Twitter at Salesforce Admins, no I. And you can connect with other awesome admins using the hashtag AwesomeAdmin. Of course, if you're on Facebook, we're on Facebook too. So Salesforce Admins is your one-stop shop for all of really great content. And don't forget, we're on YouTube as well at Salesforce Admins, which reminds me, yes, this webinar is going to be recorded, and we'll actually post it to our YouTube page. So if you're not subscribed, please do. And if you happen to miss that, you can watch it on the webinar recap page, which was the same URL you used in registration. Now, you'll probably have questions, and we want to help you answer them. So please join our admin webinar group for Q&A. It's real simple. In the Success community, you can just search for Salesforce Admins webinars or type in bit.ly/admin webinar group. Now, don't wait until the end to ask your questions. In fact, we'll be compiling them during this webinar, and we have people on hand that can start answering them. But do stick around at the end because we're going to ask Lynn some live Q&A, maybe what the last 3 digits of her Twitter handle stand for. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lynn Simons, who's going to give us an agenda and get us kicked off. Lynn?
Hi, awesome admins. I'm so honored to be here and present to this community who continually motivates me to do my job better and to always make it fun. And thanks to Mike, who I don't know if you all know this, but he's secretly a security geek himself, especially the more we hang out together and I talk to him about security and Salesforce. So I'm on the trust team at Salesforce, which is essentially our information security team. And I work with a group of folks called Trust Engagement. Our area of focus is the human side of security. We work with both our employees and our customers to make them more security aware. After all, we can build our technology to be as secure as possible, but at the end of the day, it's about humans interacting with that technology. If you listen carefully to the news about recent security breaches, you'll notice there's usually some human error or some aspect of human nature that was exploited to help the attacker achieve their goals. But I'm getting into it too fast. So I just want you to know that you're not going to be hearing a lot on this call about how to configure various features in Salesforce or a lot of technical information. Instead, we're going to talk about what it means to be a security-minded admin. An admin who can apply principles of security, including the human factor, and also take advantage of security features native in Salesforce. We'll introduce a couple of very important security features we recommend you use: two-factor authentication and security health check, and then a demo. I'll show you how security controls look in setup when you're in Lightning, which is a little different than in Classic, and I'll demo security health check while talking about best practices for setting your password policies. Password policies are a great example of how security features and the human element of security interact and intersect. And I'm super excited about this section after that, which I'd love to just dive into now, but we're going to wait a little while. I'll share with you 2 great new resources that we created just for you that you can use to up your skills as a security-minded admin. And then we'll leave 5 minutes for Q&A. Let's start by talking about what it means to be a security-minded admin. First, why is this idea of security-mindedness even important? Well, it goes back to the human element of security that I just mentioned. Any admin can become an expert in all of the security features in Salesforce by spending the time learning and studying. But as we call it in security, the secret sauce of making our Salesforce org as secure as possible lies in this idea of being aware of the human context, the business context within which we are using these features. So Astro decided to join us today and share with us 4 qualities of a security-minded admin. First, a security-minded admin understands key principles of security and can apply them to their Salesforce implementation. We're going to geek out a little for this section and imagine we're in a hardcore security course, the kind that my colleagues in trust often attend. The security-minded admin also keeps up to date on the latest in security and can do that without much effort because they know where to find the best security resources created for admins. That's when I'll talk about our new webpage on trust.salesforce.com and some awesome new learning paths on Trailhead created with admins in mind. The security-minded admin understands that security is never done. I think of it as kind of fighting the good fight. I'm on a crusade to prevent cyber criminals from getting my precious data. In other words, security isn't something that's set up once and you forget about it. Security is a living and breathing thing because the threats change, your organization changes, and your users change too. And for this reason, security configurations need to change over time based on both internal and external factors. The great thing is that Salesforce makes it easy for you to adjust to these changes. Some typical changes that might impact how our orgs are set up over time might include things like the fact that more sensitive data is being stored in Salesforce, like credit card information, or PII, like an individual's social security number. Also, your users' responsibilities might change. They may have a role where they're handling the company's most sensitive data, but when their job changes and they no longer need access to that data, we need to make sure they can't do that anymore. That's why the work is never done in security, and security can never be managed in isolation. Oh, wait a minute. I think Astro just reminded me of another quality of a security-minded admin. Astro, I can't hear you. Speak up a little. Anyways, okay. A security-minded admin knows what to do in the event that they identify suspicious activity in their Salesforce implementation. This is really critical, and that's why Astro's reminding me about it. Astro's telling me that the security-minded admin knows how to contact their security department internally at their own company, and that by sending an email to security@salesforce.com, our 24/7 team can check out suspicious activity you've witnessed. Thanks, Astro. Admins in the community have been pretty honest with me in the last couple of years since I've been on the trust team when we talk about the fact that they're intimidated by the idea that security is part of their responsibility. And some aren't really sure how to prioritize this amongst all of the features that can be configured in their orgs and all of the other work and demands from their user base. But security is something that's accessible to everyone, although it's a very technical subject. I'm here to tell you there are fundamental principles of security that if you understand and keep them in mind, you can go a long way to making your implementation more secure. So first, I'm going to start with a cool discovery I made about security in Salesforce. Although I've worked in technology and security for a number of years, I decided last year to take a 50-hour course to brush up on my skills and also deepen them a little bit so I could talk to the engineers on our team. And on the first day of our training, we spent the entire day talking about the human aspects of security and reviewed the fundamental principles of information security. You can see 3 of them on this slide. Here's the cool thing. When I started to think about each of these concepts, I realized that security truly is baked into everything Salesforce does. Let me walk you through it. And once you get a grasp of these principles, you'll understand the fundamental principles by which security professionals, all these guys on my team, make decisions in their jobs every day. I think it's pretty cool that a person like me, without an engineering degree, is working and following the same principles that all the security engineers sitting around me are following. So let's dig into this. A fundamental principle we talk about in the security world is the principle of least privilege, and it happens to be particularly applicable to Salesforce. This principle stands for the idea that users should be given the minimum access to data that they need to do their job. In Salesforce, the foundation of data security is how roles, profiles, org-wide defaults, and so on are set up. This is all about who gets access to read, write, edit, and delete data in Salesforce. You may have heard us refer to this as who sees what if you've attended Salesforce presentations or seen videos on YouTube. Remember earlier I mentioned that the security-minded admin keeps a pulse on their company and users because over time, their need to access can change. And if you keep the principle of least privilege in mind as you observe changes in your user base, you'll have a guiding light when you make changes in data security. Next, know your security landscape. This is all about knowing what are the primary risks to your data and what actions can you take to reduce that risk. If you've ever heard me present before about security, spent a lot of time on the fact that today's target is the user. One of the most common ways that attackers try to infiltrate companies is to steal their data through sending phishing emails to users. Phishing emails tempt users, based on human nature, to download a malicious file or a virus that allows the attacker to gain access to the user's machine or credentials. For this reason, it's of utmost importance to educate your users about good password habits, such as not sharing their Salesforce password and not using their Salesforce password for any other websites or services. The easiest way to teach this is when you onboard new users before they get their Salesforce credentials. But I know the reality is that you have users who are already onboarded and they don't think about these things that often. So another way that I've seen admins train users on password awareness is by sending out a periodic email to their users, putting a sign up in their cubicle, reminding people about password hygiene, and including security awareness amongst other tips and tricks and training. Last, and kind of the most exciting, is defense in depth. This is where things get super exciting and really we can geek out like security people. So because we know that humans are a bit unpredictable and can make data more vulnerable by their actions, there is always more we can do. The term defense in depth may sound intimidating, but simply means that because security and technology are not perfect, we layer different security mechanisms, or what we call security controls, to increase the security of an org. Defense in depth also helps minimize data loss, because data is protected in more than one way. So if the bad guys, if they get in your network, which happens, if they get in there, they get as little data as possible. The security-minded admin will consider additional security settings like two-factor authentication and login IP ranges to create defense in depth and add more protection to their data. So congratulations, you've now taken your first mini security course. Now for something a little lighter than Security 101. We're really excited to give you a sneak peek of our new security site for customers found at trust.salesforce.com. This site is currently in beta, and we're evolving it and adding functionality a few times a week. We expect we'll be live sometime between Dreamforce and the end of the year, but in the meantime, please feel free to check it out and send us your feedback. This site is for you, and we want to make sure that you are getting what you need out of the site. We've created a central location in this site. You can easily find the latest information on security best practices. This includes links to Trailhead modules that address specific security topics, and will point you to additional admin and developer resources. We will also feature upcoming events and webinars like this one for those of you who want to dig a little deeper and gain security chops. So check it out. Another super exciting thing that I want to share with you is a new trail that we created on Trailhead for admins. It was released, I think, 2 weeks ago for admins who want to learn about the fundamentals of security in Salesforce. With each of these badges, you'll build on your security skills. For those of you who are just starting out, I would recommend checking out the Security Basics module. This module explores the human element of security and will help you choose the right security settings for your org. The other badges we chose for this trail will introduce you to topics like user authentication, which is how Salesforce knows who you are when you log into your org, data security, the who sees what we talked about earlier, and identity basics, which introduces you to the language of identity. And once you master those basics, there are more badges and more badges we're building that you can use and check out on Trailhead that will help you deepen your skills. One badge near and dear to my heart is the Security Specialist Super Badge. We created this badge for those of you who want to challenge yourself and consider yourself somewhat of a security expert in Salesforce. This super badge will walk you through a real-life scenario, and you can put your security-minded admin skills to the test. Because this badge is more than just testing whether you can configure controls, it's also testing whether you know how to think about security and put it into the context of real life. Today we're going to highlight a couple of security features that we at Salesforce recommend all admins prioritize: two-factor authentication and security health check. Some of you may have heard us talk about these features before on other webinars or presentations, but for today, let's think about them a little differently from the perspective of a security-minded admin, not simply as features on a long list that we need to implement. 2FA. It's the feature that we on the trust team at Salesforce are the most passionate about today. 2FA is a great example of a single security feature that you can implement that has a major impact on your org security. Remember the concept defense in depth? This is what we're talking about. 2FA specifically protects against password compromise. As I mentioned earlier, passwords on their own are vulnerable to phishing. No matter how complex or hard you remember to make your password, and no matter how much you train your users, which you still need to do, but you do need to provide these layers of security. When you add 2 factors of authentication, you make it even harder for bad actors to gain access to your Salesforce orgs if someone loses their password or it's stolen. At Salesforce, we use 2FA to protect our own Salesforce orgs. And when my team trains our Salesforce employees about 2FA, we tell them that 2FA is something you know, your password, and something you have, a code generated in your Salesforce Authenticator app. Sometimes the something you have might be a soft token or a hard token that generates a code from the side of your computer, not always a mobile phone. So how do you get this set up and running? Salesforce Authenticator 2-step setup. Step 1, simply set up a 2FA permission set. And step 2, at login, users will be invited to use 2FA. All they have to do is download a free Authenticator app in Google Play or the App Store. Just a quick story about how easy this is to set up. We demoed this feature at the regional user group meeting Midwest Dreamin', which, by the way, was totally awesome a few weeks ago. And we met some admins who immediately felt so passionate about security and setting up 2FA, they asked us to sit down with them and guide them through setting it up. And in a matter of minutes, we had Salesforce Authenticator up and running and set for their orgs, and they were off and running. If you want to learn more, because there is just a little bit more to this that you might want to understand, check out our user authentication badge that I just showed you. And there was also an admin webinar a few months ago on this topic. So Mike, it would be awesome if we could post a link to the recording with the recording in the community of this webinar so people can check it out. Another great feature Salesforce built for admins is the Security Health Check, which provides you with immediate analysis of security settings in your org and actionable links in case you want to change settings based on what you're seeing in the health check. And for you security-minded admins, check out the standard value field, which I'll show you in a couple of minutes. It's actually the recommended value for that setting based on best practice. Today, you can check out the health of your settings for password policies, session settings, and network access configuration. But stay tuned, because with future releases, you'll be able to check out even more about the security health of your org. I think the best way to bring this to life is to show you in a demo. So here I am in my login page. I'm going to log into my org. And you'll see that I'm in Lightning. And Lightning might look a little bit different to some of you who've been using Classic. So I want to make sure everyone understands where to find settings. So this little cog and wheel guy, that's settings. So let's go to Setup Home. What you'll see on the left are all of the things that you're used to seeing in Classic for setup: administration, platform tools, and settings. And when you scroll down, you'll see there's a section dedicated to security controls. And these are some of the things that I've talked about you'll find here. But important for this demo is, where is Security Health Check? So what you can see here is that I'm checking the health of my trial org that I'm showing you today. And although this line is green, I have high standards for myself, and 62% health, when there's 100% that can be achieved, just doesn't seem like enough to me. So I'm going to take a look down here at the different settings and their level of risk, and I can take action on changing those right away so that I can increase my security health. So here, what shows up in red presents a high risk to the Salesforce org. And the things you see here are all around password policies that need to be improved. In yellow, you'll see medium risk security settings that can be changed. And in green, things that you have set in your Salesforce org that meet security standards. So let's dig into this. The great thing about Security Health Check is, number one, I can see a standard value. That represents the recommended value by Salesforce to keep your org secure. You can always exceed that, no problem, but let's make sure that we meet those standards. So here's the cool thing. If you click Edit, Salesforce security health check will take you right to those settings in your org, and you can change them at that moment and see how that impacts the security of your org. So first, we have user passwords set to expire. Never? Who set up this org? It couldn't have been me, because I would never do that. So the standard for passwords to expire is, or for password rotation, as we call it, is 90 days. So I'm going to reset that. Enforce password history. This has to do with whether your org remembers that people have set particular passwords. It's always better to use new and unique passwords. So I'm going to tell Salesforce to remember the last 10 passwords so that people have to come up with new ones that are more secure. And in terms of minimum password length, 5 is okay, but we recommend 8 to 10 as a minimum threshold for the number of characters for a password. Password complexity requirement, no restriction. I could use my Twitter handle, is that what you're saying? No, we don't want to do that. We want passwords to have a mix of alphanumeric and special characters. And there's some other choices that are pretty cool there that you can choose from that are robust as well. Maximum invalid login attempts. I'm saying here, by saying no limit, that somebody could log in with an attempted password and there's no limit to the amount of times they can try before they're locked out of the session. That just doesn't seem like a good idea to me, especially when there are computers that can try to use passwords randomly to try to break into someone's account. So I'm going to set that to 3. Let's see what happens when we go back into security health check. Let's look at the health of our org just from fixing these particular security. Oh, look, I'm at 86%. That's much better. Since we don't have enough time to get this up to 100% because I'm a security geek, I'm going to wait, and I'll do that later after we get off of this webinar. But in the meantime, let's get back to the presentation. With everything you've learned today about being a security-minded admin, there are 3 key actions you can take to improve security. First, you can log into your own org and find where you can configure security controls and setup. While you're there, try out the security health check. Examine your password policies. Do they meet or exceed standards? Great. If not, what else is posing high risk? Think about why this particular policy might pose more risk for your company. This might be a great time to find out, if you don't know already, what are the password standards for your company's IT or security department. Make sure you're meeting or exceeding these standards. Last, but certainly not least, spend time evaluating the addition of 2FA to your Salesforce org. Implementation of this feature will start to build that defense in depth we talked about and will definitely give you peace of mind. Let's wrap up with a quick review of the resources available to you to help you build your security skills. Check out our beta on the Trust site, and while you're there, you'll find links to our newest Trailhead modules. Security Basics is a great place to start to learn more about the human element of security. Another awesome resource is admin.salesforce.com. Me and my colleagues have written a bunch of blog posts about security topics that we hope you'll find valuable. Just type the term security into the search field, and all of our recent posts will appear before your eyes. So with that, I'll pass it on to Mike, and we'll take some questions.
Thanks, Lynn. You bet. I am a security geek as much as you are, and I love that new site. I think that's going to be so valuable for admins to check in on. I want to get started with questions. You mentioned a lot about Trailhead, and there's a lot of badges and modules, and you mentioned super badges, and if I'm just getting started with security, I can kind of feel overwhelmed. So if I was going to head to Trailhead today, where would I start?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to note that if you go into Trailhead, not through our website, directly from a link from our Trust site, you can just go into Trailhead and search on the term security, and you will get a number of badges there. But I think a great one to look for is the Security Basics badge. That one has more of a tone of explaining why security is important, how security is a factor of creating risk in the organization and how it creates risk to data, but also tells you how you can work with your users and set up your Salesforce org to make it more secure. If you really want to dig into this who sees what and how to set up roles and profiles in a secure way, I'd look at the data security module. So those are probably the 2 that I'd start with.
Great. Now, I know for those admins on the webinar, perhaps they've heard of a thing that we're doing in October called Dreamforce, and they may be headed there. If not, they want to check out sessions. If you're headed to Dreamforce this year and you wanted to dive deeper into learning about security and being a security-minded admin, are there sessions you would suggest they add to their agenda?
Absolutely. Well, first, I would tell them to stop at the Admin Cafe, which our team is sponsoring, so that they could learn a little bit more about two-factor authentication. So you can have your espresso, your iced coffee, and learn a little bit about 2FA and learn from real security folks at Salesforce. But then to go to a session, we have every year over 70 sessions on security. But for admins this year, we have specifically 7 that we've created just for you. And these came from the community. These didn't come from Salesforce. These were submitted by your awesome admin colleagues. And they're just right on the mark in terms of what people need to see. So one that I recommend for the beginner is a security guide for rock stars. This is going to be a fun session. We're going to pretend we're going to a U2 concert, and we're going to learn a little bit about security and how going to a concert, a rock concert, is a lot like setting up security in Salesforce. So that's a great one. The other one that I would check out is Sharing is Caring, except when it's not. And that one is all about setting up roles and profiles. And, you know, that's one of those things I was talking about earlier, that if anyone can look up in help and training or watch a YouTube video about how to set these things up. What's going to be special about this session, which we're running twice, is that you'll learn anecdotally from one of our MVPs about, you know, what's it really like to work with users. What are the dynamics internal to their org to help them make decisions about how to set up this who sees what in their Salesforce org?
That's great advice. Lynn, we had some questions. Obviously, working through password changes, you don't want to change those a lot. The configuration that you showed was really easy to do. Can you speak to some of the impacts of when you would change a password from, say, expiring every 30 days to every 60 days, or vice versa?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the biggest impact that we didn't talk about today, and I hope I'm answering the question, but what we didn't talk about is that sometimes security settings can impact users. And by changing settings, you're changing the habits of the user. They might need to spend more time more often and think up more passwords, and that can cause a little bit of rumbling in your organization. But that's why education is so important. But I think the question is, will all passwords expire? Could you just repeat that question? I didn't catch that last part about the nuance between 30 and 60 days, because I got so excited talking about user communities.
Yeah, I think what we'll do is we'll post that question on the webinar community so that everybody has a chance to see the answer.
Sure.
And since we're at time, I'll go ahead and wrap it up and ask that any other further questions, go ahead and post those to the webinar group. So thanks for being on the webinar today, Lynn.
Thanks so much. I can't wait to jump into the community and get some of these questions answered for people.